hey, Mr. Man Editor, did you read my thing like you said you would? What did you think?
Hello and welcome to Fierce and Flawless, the Female Project. I am Dr. Antonella Kaler and I am on a mission to find out exactly what it takes to build an indestructible foundation and achieve our best reality. I am thrilled to bring you stories of inspiring women who were fierce and relentless when pursuing their passions, who did not blame their struggles on so-called character flaws, and who took control to lead extraordinary lives. If you're a woman who is tired of feeling like your life is merely a product of cause and effect, and you are ready to be the woman that causes the effect, keep listening to learn the necessary insights to navigate life's toughest challenges, break through the most disheartening plateaus, and unleash your inner alpha woman. And don't forget, you have the exclusive opportunity to win our Alpha Empowerment Book Bundle. It's 3 life-changing books whose authors you heard speak on the show and a 12-week wellness program by me. So please visit www.thefemaleproject.net/podcast to find out exactly what you need to do to participate. So good luck and thank you for listening. Hello, Alphas, and welcome to another episode of Fierce and Flawless, the Female Project. Today, I had the pleasure of talking to Mandy Pipher. She's a Toronto-based writer and editor who's been involved in political activism since she was 12 years old. She crowdfunded a campaign, went to Oxford University, where she was actively supported by Margaret Atwood. Mandy and I talk about some crucial topics like the portrayal of sexual harassment in the media and sexual harassment in the digital space. Mandy goes on to give some amazing tips and insight into how to start writing if you are ready for your voice to be heard. And we end with a thorough evaluation of mansplaining. We talk about what it is, the fact that yes, women can mansplain too, and what to do if you're ever stuck in that cringe-worthy situation of being mansplained to. I had an absolute blast doing this interview with a true alpha woman, Mandy Pipher. So, Mandy, thank you so much for carving out some time out of your busy schedule to get on the call with me. I would absolutely love it if you could please share your origin story, how you found your passion, and how your life has led you to what you're doing these days.
Well, I guess I have a lot of passions, so it took a while for me to sort of settle into one of them, if I even have. I've always cared a lot about a lot of things, various social justice issues, and writing and books. So figuring out how to combine those things took me a little bit. I worked in politics for a while until deciding to go back to school for the English language. And now I manage to mostly combine those two passions for both politics, social justice, and words by working as a writer and as a teacher of writing. So that sums it up about as quickly as I can. I'm not sure how much of an origin that is. We can also talk about me growing up in Scarborough, but that's a whole other can of fish.
Sure, I grew up in Mississauga.
Oh, great. Yes, other side of the Toronto coin. Yeah.
Exactly. And you went to get your degree at Oxford, is that right?
That's right, my master's, yeah.
Yes. How was that?
It was amazing. Yeah, I mean, I'll be paying it off for probably the rest of my life, but, I wouldn't trade it for anything. It was such an incredible intellectual exploration experience. And I also met some incredible people that I expect to know forever. It was just a really wonderful intellectual community in a lot of ways, and incredibly challenging. I got all my first gray hairs there. And I kind of loved every single one of them. I'm not saying, I'm painting a bit of a rosy picture. It was certainly incredibly difficult, but it was the sort of difficult that was very rewarding. It pushed me to my limits in a number of ways. And that ended up being quite the rewarding experience.
Wow. Now, if we can hone in a little bit sort of on the some important issues like sexual harassment in particular, have you noticed any change in the coverage of these types of stories as a media expert? Has it improved at all? Is there a little bit less bias, more bias? Has there been any interesting trend that you noticed?
That's an interesting question. I mean, first of all, I should specify that I am a freelance writer. Just on a technical note, I should probably make that clear. But to your question, I think there has been some really interesting space opening up in terms of different ways to talk about sexual harassment in the media. The Me Too movement has certainly allowed a lot more voices to come forward. And sometimes I get a bit pessimistic, and I think that these things do run in cycles in some ways in terms of the cultural conversation about gender. But on my good days, I like to think that there really is something new in a positive way about the kind of space that's opened up for new voices and for women to talk about our experiences in a way that is more vulnerable, but actually being heard.
Now, do you think that there's still like a prevalence of assumptions and bias against women who try to report sexual harassment? And it's always seems like there's that little seed of, oh, maybe she's just, trying to play the sexism card, or maybe she's trying to get special treatment. Oh, what isn't sexism these days? Like, you still hear that kind of bias still sort of pervasive through this entire issue.
It's really tricky. I mean, any kind of progress certainly goes and stops and starts. The whole 3 steps forward, 2 steps back thing is certainly true. I would say that it can be really disheartening to hear how much of that sort of bias is still out there. And I mean, as women, I think it seems completely insane to most of us to think, why would anyone choose to have this be a part of our lives, and of course we don't want this to be something that we're receiving attention for. And the fact that that is something that comes up at all in a way that gets any kind of credence is troubling, partially because it just shows the vast gap between the experience and understanding of men and women. I don't know a single woman who doesn't just know to her core that is insane. That we all just wish so badly that not that we could live our lives as, sexless creatures, but that we all just wish so badly that we could just live our lives being seen for who we are, and that our gender, or the way that our gender is perceived, didn't have to interfere with our lives to the extent that it does. And it took me years as a teenager to fully believe that sexual harassment was a thing that was really happening to me, because I didn't want it to, because it was really lousy. The fact that it couldn't, that I was seen often by a lot of people, first as a woman and second, ideally, as a person, is not something that I ever wanted to accept, but the world kind of forced it upon me. But I just hope that we have a bit of a window of opportunity here for men and women to start having deeper conversations about the gulf between our experiences, and for men in particular to really step up and accept that they perhaps need to be humble and listen and start thinking about what it means that so many women in their lives and in the culture in which they live are talking about this thing that seems completely alien to them. Maybe they should listen to why that is, and why we end up living such different lives as men and women in the same cities and in the same houses and often in the same beds. I think just a classroom of people is asked, of mixed men and women was asked, so what do you do in your daily life to avoid being raped?
Yes.
And there was just, sort of uncomfortable laughter and just shock from the men. And then they eventually answered, well, nothing, I don't think about it. And then every single one of the women went through their kind of detailed routines about it affects every aspect of her life. Of course. Yeah. It's like it's a mental debate whether or not I really should shut the sliding glass door off my bedroom on the third floor.
Yes, absolutely.
It's like, well, it's on the third floor. Well, there's a balcony. There was that balcony rapist once. Okay, yes. But I really want to breeze, and the heat and the air conditioning's busted. That's just our lives.
Now, there has been, well, at least I find in the past few years, a little bit of improvement with sort of kind of employment programs and sexual harassment awareness, kind of in the real tangible world. But if you take things online or just into the digital space, it's like the Wild West out there. There's no accountability, and sexual harassment is a lot more pervasive.
Yeah.
Now, do you think that there's kind of a lack of accountability of what some of the issues are when you kind of go online?
Yeah, it's a troubling one. As you mentioned, it is a bit of a Wild West situation, and the analogy is apt in terms of an area that's not as cultivated or understood, or it doesn't have laws yet. As I think that's really the situation that we're in when it comes to digital spaces. It's so new. And it's the issues that we're grappling with are the same issues and the same social hierarchies and the same social injustices, but they're in a different realm that we haven't yet figured out either how to regulate in an official sense when it comes to people's various freedoms and oppressions, or the social norms of how we should be. And especially when you're mixing people from all around the world with very different social norms, it's quite the situation, which in so many ways can provide many fruitful connections and ideas, which is what's wonderful, obviously, about digital spaces. It's something that we're just going to have to continue to grapple with. And there is a little bit more accountability than there was, I think, but then we're also dealing with mob justice and what that means. And I mean, it speaks to a very real failure in the justice system that we feel the need to have online mob justice. It's something that comes up a lot, and it's something that we actually talked about a little bit in this forum I was facilitating at the University of Toronto a few weeks ago on sexual harassment and violence in digital spaces. And one of the panelists made an interesting point. Lauren McKeon, who's the digital editor for The Walrus, she made the point that it's really all right to opt out of the online spaces, right? I mean, not having a voice, but that we can often feel obligated to engage in things online where we feel like there's something really problematic happening. And that kind of engagement doesn't really have the same effect necessarily online as it does in real life, where interventions are often proven to be helpful.
Now, since you're mentioning about, women getting their voices heard, now, do you have any advice for women? Like, let's say we have a woman that wants to share her story and kind of get out there a little bit.
It's a good question. And it often does seem like just such a tangled woods out there, and it's hard to know where to start. Yeah. And yes, starting a blog is always great. And doing it within your own network first, I find helps with what is the most difficult about starting to put your own voice out there, which is the psycho-emotional part of it, right? It's really hard to to put your words out there, even if it isn't about something extremely personal, and then much more so if it is. So I would say start with your network so that when you do decide to do something somewhat more public, even like a blog, you can do it within a supportive context where you at least have people engaging with you, because it can be really disheartening to just sort of send your words out into the void, right? Especially if it's something that you've worked hard on and that's been really difficult for you to share, and you're anticipating and kind of bracing for something horrible, but then if there's silence, it can be just as bad. Yeah. So I would say there's no easy answer, obviously, and it depends on the context in which you're in, but networks and communities in online spaces and in the physical realm are, I would say, the best way to get started.
Build up the confidence a little bit. I love that advice.
Yeah, it's really important. You don't talk about it enough with writing and with putting yourself out there. It can be really tricky. And also, actually, I should say too, in terms of sending articles to established places, do that. It can be really tricky as well. But just find a specific name of an editor of a publication that you like or where you think your piece might fit, and just write a short, to the point email about what it is that you want to write for them. It's always worth a shot. And then just be prepared that you're going to get a lot of silence on that front, and that, if you don't have the energy to push, then don't push, and then wait for a day when you do have the energy. And I mean the psycho-emotional energy to go like, hey, editor so-and-so. Usually, exactly. Actually, man editor so-and-so. Hey, Mr. Man editor. Did you read my thing like you said you would? What did you think?
Now, speaking of reading and writing, we're coming up right close to the end of our time here. So I always like to pester my guests with suggestions of a book that had a profound impact on your life that you would like to recommend to the audience.
Oh my goodness. It's so dangerous to ask an English teacher for book recommendations, because of course I just want to ask a million questions first. Like, I want to know everything about the specifics of what every audience member likes in a book in order to recommend. But I'm going to try and curb that.
Very personal, yes. Very personal to you, one that spoke to you, and why? Because, of course, there's, I'm sure, hundreds, thousands of books that you would like to recommend that are all fantastic. But
yeah. but yeah, okay, I'll stick with it, especially with the theme of our talk. And a book that I love and certainly had a huge impact on me was Virginia Woolf's A Room of One's Own, which is a foundational essay on what it means to write and be a woman in the world. And it was written, I guess, 100 years ago now almost. And it still is so applicable. And, Virginia Woolf often has a reputation for being inaccessible. I don't really understand why she has quite that reputation, but certainly A Room of One's Own is short, it's beautifully written, and it just kind of takes you on a little journey where she talks about what it means to be a woman writing in the world. It started because she was asked to give a talk at a women's college on the subject women and writing. And she took that topic and asked, what does that even mean? Are you wanting me to write about women and the things that they write? Are you wanting me to write about words that are written about women? And she explored all aspects of that. And it's a really delightful read. It's really affirming and heartening in a number of ways.
Oh, that sounds wonderful. And is there anything else, any message that you wanted to share with our listeners, whether it's just advice or motivational or a passion project you want to talk about? Open floor.
Oh, goodness. All right. Well, I suppose I would just want to say two things. First of all, to emphasize a note that I suppose I've touched on. I've had a couple of points during this lovely chat, which is that it's okay to fail. and to pick yourself back up again. It's something that's thrown around a lot and is a lot easier said than done. Everyone struggles, and it's fine to struggle, and you just keep going. And that's just kind of, the nature of being alive, to put it, to put just a small point on it. So I would say that. And then the other thing I would want to mention is that I'm excited to be starting my own podcast.
That's awesome.
It's been in the works for a little bit. So it's with Scott Colby, who's the opinions editor at the Toronto Star. And we are wanting to do a podcast that deals with exactly what you and I were talking about just earlier on this podcast, which is that gap of understanding and experience between men and women. And so we're trying to have a really positive and open conversation with co-hosts, one of which is me and the other is Scott, where Scott says, okay, hey, I'm just kind of, in many ways, a regular guy. I'm a dad of a couple of kids. I want to be a good guy. I want to understand what women are going through, but I don't always get it. And he's going to basically just ask me questions, and I'm like, all right, so this is the reality of it. And we're going to call it Mansplaining with Mandy. Because I'm going to talk about mansplaining and also explain things in a very nice and non-mansplaining way, I promise.
Can I please have your definition of mansplaining?
Yeah.
Because this is a topic I love. And I don't know if you saw a while ago, there was one of the NASA astronauts actually did a little post on Instagram that was talking about just the physics pressure in her cabin and all that kind of stuff. And there was a guy that came out with just so you know, this is what's actually happening. And it's like, this woman is an astronaut, buddy. Like, get off your keyboard warrior mode here.
Unreal.
And it's like, please don't mansplain a female astronaut about the science behind what she's doing at the space station.
Oh, that is spectacular.
But to be fair, we're talking about mob justice. He got eaten alive. This was on Twitter, and he got just cannibalized by the audience.
I mean, I don't want to support cannibalism. However,
it was a very hilarious thread to first see it. Then my jaw dropped, and then I saw the upcoming comments, and you just laugh and laugh. But if I could please have your definition of mansplaining, that would be wonderful.
Mansplaining is often best described through examples, is the thing. But if I were to provide just a definition, I would say that mansplaining is explaining something condescendingly about which the person doing the explaining knows very little or less than he, and it is usually a he, thinks that he does.
Phrases usually start with, well, actually.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. I would say that actually mansplaining is the opposite of listening.
Now, is it possible for a female to mansplain?
Absolutely.
Anyone
can mansplain.
We're not off the hook here.
Oh, not at all. I mean, certainly men do it more, but that's, I don't think, first of all, I should say, I don't think that's anything that's innate to men. I think that if women had been the ones who had most of the social and economic power and been able to literally buy and sell men for the past couple of millennia, that we would be the ones mansplaining, so to speak. I think it's just a function of social power and a sense of entitlement. So it's, the fact that it has a gendered name has to do with the patriarchy, not anything that's, nasty about men in particular, right? We can all be, entitled jerks, but it's easier for those of us that have been handed power than for others.
Now, if you're a woman who is facing an incidence of some particularly painful mansplaining, what do you do?
It really depends on the context, unfortunately. So I would say,
well, staying, classy and not giving somebody a black eye, that would be helpful.
I mean, yeah, avoid prison is usually like a generally good rule I find in my life. But yeah, I've been in situations where sometimes the best thing to do, and this is what a lot of us are doing anyway, is just to kind of get out of the situation as quickly as possible. I mean, if someone's doing that most of the time, you're not going to get through to them, and just stop wasting your time. Don't feel the need to be nice and placate him, basically, is the first thing I'd say, as women are so often taught to do. Sure. Just get out of there and talk to someone who's interesting, if you is what I would say, and who you can actually have a real two-way conversation with, and who listens to you and values your expertise and asks you questions and, hey, considers that you might even have expertise. Yeah. So, but of course, if it's, your boss, that's not an option. So I just want to say it depends on context.
Of course. And it can be very difficult because especially in the, in employment, and you have somebody talking to you from a position of power, you then don't even know, are they mansplaining because you're a woman, or are they just a jerky type of boss that
right?
feels the need to interact with their with people they manage in that particular way. But it's it's never an easy situation. No. And if you're a very non-confrontational person, like I feel like with every year that I get older, I get progressively more confrontational.
Yeah, me too.
And not in a negative way, not because it's getting to me. It's almost like I care less about that person's opinions, so I feel totally fine standing up for my personal beliefs.
Yeah.
There is a fantastic quote, and it literally says something along the lines of, as I'm getting older, I'm getting into a new wonderful stage where I went from, I shouldn't say that, to, I'm just going to say that and see what happens.
Yeah. Yes. Very true. Yep. I can very much relate to that. And it is so freeing. It's true. And something I don't really understand at all about our culture's fixation on youth. I think, okay, now that I'm in my 30s, I just think I would never go back to being 23 for $1 million. Like, I just wouldn't do it. It's so great to be older and to just feel self-possessed and not care so much. And actually, to your question of what to do when you're in an employment situation and you can't just leave or talk back or whatever it is that you feel like doing to the mansplainer or to deal with the mansplainer, I would say just either go and vent to a friend immediately afterwards, or even better, quickly write down what happened. And that can really help, especially if it happens multiple times, to remind yourself of your own perspective and that you're not crazy, which is what we often get told, is that it's in your head. And if you make a note of it, you write it down. And actually, Virginia Woolf once wrote this too. She wrote, "Nothing has really happened until it has been written down." And I find that, obviously, it's a cute saying, but it really can help us keep track of what happens in our lives and our own perspectives on it. And then going back and reading it can be a really affirming and going, "Oh yeah, that did happen, and this was my perspective on it."
And it's funny that you say that it's a cute saying, because God, did that ever resonate with me, because, if you're in a healthcare field and you're in medicine and you're charting, they tell you that day one, if you didn't write it down, it did not happen.
Oh, really?
Absolutely. Amazing. Absolutely. So it's more of, for record keeping, but this is a consistent theme across many fields. So it's she's a very relevant saying. There you go. Virginia Woolf probably didn't even know that she's
relevant everywhere. I love
she's
my
relevant everywhere. Exactly. All right. Well, absolutely. So don't be afraid of your voice. It's absolutely fine to have an opinion. You're entitled to have an opinion, and it's okay if you feel that it's a little maybe confrontational sometimes, but you're entitled to have one.
Yes, exactly. And if you're getting those gray hairs and wrinkles, relish them, because man is so much better than being 22.
No, I would never go back.
Well, that's the 22-year-olds. They lots of energy. Enjoy the energy. That's great. I have to sleep more. I wish that wasn't the thing.
Yes, your body's certainly a lot more forgiving at 22 when, you go out, you don't make the best nutritional choices, you partake in certain beverages over the weekend, and then you bounce back and you're good to write a dissertation the next day. Yeah, that doesn't happen after you're 30. That's it. Warranty's expired, kids.
That's true. That's true. So enjoy all that stuff. Like, live that up. Yeah, go for it.
Exactly. Well, thank you so much, Mandy. I had a blast talking to you. Thank you for connecting with me. And I cannot wait for your podcast. Just the fact that the term mansplaining in it, like, I'm already mentally subscribed. I can't wait.
Fabulous. Thanks so much, Antonella. This was a treat.
Thank you. Okay. Have a good day.
You too. Bye.
Hey Alphas, it's Dr. Antonella from Fierce and Flawless, the Female Project. I cannot wait to bring you more incredible stories and exceptional insights from women who made an impact. So join me on this journey. Subscribe and comment with nominations for guests you would like featured next. I want to deliver content that ignites a spark in you, so your feedback is extremely important to me. To connect with me and to get the resources mentioned in this episode, visit www.thefemaleproject.net or add me on Instagram at dr.antonella. Thank you for listening and stay tuned.